Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very conscious that it's us separating you from your grub, so we're going to make this as interactive and as engaging as possible. As you can see from the list of people we have here on the stage, we have great experience, great insight, and what we're going to try and do is get to the truth of some of the notions that exist around digital audio in particular. I know that Audio XI, this is your bread and butter. I get emails from you all the time, so I'm very familiar with what Audio XI does. But I want to start with Sandra because from the bits and pieces that I know, it doesn't seem that digital audio's share of advertising spend is reflective of the consumption side and share that they have. Is that true, and why do you think that is?
Is it getting its fair share of spend? It's such a good question, and we should talk more about it because, so at the moment, digital audio gets about 10 or 11% of the total share of audio spend. So, as we saw from the figures before, there is a gap between consumption and investment. There's many reasons to that. Potentially the most important one for media planners, media buyers is that we need more joined up data.
Yeah.
So if we think about what helped, a few years ago, what helped video on demand to get more share when looking at the total video share, that is when we leaned as an industry, we invested in a lot of data that allowed us to have the holistic view of the viewing patterns. Globally and locally, but we need more of that, and that's one of the reasons why the work that Radiocentre does is so important, because for this particular case, we can't rely on the global data because radio is so much stronger in Ireland. Mm-hmm. So that is one thing that would definitely help to increase the share.
And I suppose the key message here is that audio in Ireland is incredibly strong, whether that is traditional radio or on-demand audio. And one of my frustrations as someone on the production and the presenting end of things is that it can be hard to get clear data and to understand and digest that data, not only from a revenue point of view, but also to see what your listeners are into and what they're responding to. Obviously, when we're live, we get text reaction and you can say, well, that was really popular, that not so much. What's being done in this space to try and address that? Because it is such a key element of what everyone in this room is all about.
Well, there's loads of data that's available at the evaluation stage of a campaign. So, we can assess unique listens, the average frequency of a campaign, and there's a plethora of data on impressions. You can look at impressions by day, device, and location. Mm-hmm. However, when we're looking at evaluating podcasts in particular, the data exists with our media partners, but there's no one main source that houses all that information. So it's quite cumbersome for us as agencies to gather it. There's podcasts coming and going all the time. It's the nature of the business. So, on a monthly basis, it requires agencies to collate that information and keep it up to date. So as agencies, we would certainly like to see one source of information that's updated.
But we heard talk of AI at the last presentation. Surely that's going to be a key tool and an asset to all of us, all of the shareholders in the radio and audio industry, because if that information can be collated and compiled and digested and spat out in a digestible way, then everyone's a winner.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And is that something that we're seeing as of yet, or is it still trying to feel our way through?
We haven't currently seen it, and AI would certainly be a very easy way of collating that data. If you compare it to the JNLR, there's a lot of anticipation about those results from broadcasters and the presenters alike, and they celebrate it on the day, whereas we don't have that for podcasts. It doesn't get that publicity that it deserves.
Aside from the Instagram shot that people post up going, I'm number one of the charts for 6 seconds and then they move on. Yeah. Carol, what's your understanding and appreciation for digital audio versus other mediums? Do we here in Ireland, I think we were slower than perhaps the US to embrace podcasting and on-demand audio and all the rest. But is it starting to level out now, and are brands as appreciative of the digital audio as well as the traditional mediums?
Yeah, I still think that people love radio, they understand radio. You know, I think Ireland especially, even as we've seen today, we have such a love affair with radio, and we understand the Jane and Laura and how effective it is, and it's such a part of a traditional media plan that they know what they're going to get with it. Audio is still an incremental part of a plan, so they're still adding it on, but it's incredibly effective. I mean, as you've seen, so many pieces of research today. But in terms of like attentive minutes, like attention was a big thing that was mentioned today. You know, attentive minutes, there was a research study by Lumen and Dentsu last year, the year before, and it showed that audio actually held 56% more attentive minutes than other media. So I do think there's starting to be more pieces of research looking into that. Also emotion as well, you know, another big term that was thrown around today. And I think people are starting to understand that a bit more. And, you know, a piece of music can really trigger a memory, can really bring you back to, you know, even Christmas when you were 10 years old, you can remember just from a piece of music.
Yeah.
And using that in your audio ads packs such a punch. You know, we're talking about sonic branding as well, so it's really good to see people leaning into that a lot more. So I think a lot of this research that's coming out now is helping people to understand and value audio a lot more.
Yeah, we have this thing in Newstalk, I don't know if it's in other stations, but in Newstalk we have this term, the Hoover stopping moment. So it's when there's a piece of audio where if you're sort of passively listening and something happens, you stop the Hoover and you think, oh my gosh. And advertising has that power as well. We saw some great examples earlier on in the presentation. And Graham, are you seeing more people leaning into that now, that idea of having an impact and being creative with their advertising rather than just pushing messages out there?
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing we would push a lot, obviously, in Audio XI is we're probably at the stage in the industry with digital audio. A lot of clients just get their FM spot ad and they'll just give it to you to run on digital audio. But one thing we'd always say is digital audio combines the art of audio advertising with the science of digital media buying. So before we even serve somebody an ad, we know things like the age group they're in, their gender, the device they're listening on, the operating software of their phone, right down to their internet service provider. So one thing I always would push is we have all this data to hand. So when it comes to building out assets and you're looking to speak to your audience, you can use all of this before you start. We've done it with brands, you know, looking to hit different audiences. We will build out different scripts, use different VOs and target the right messaging in. And we'd also do it on a larger scale. I think a lot of people are probably more familiar now with dynamic audio. So the premise of it is all around personalization at scale. So instead of just serving that one generic ad, we can serve thousands of variations of an ad. We're in campaign with McDonald's at the minute. We've 250-odd thousand variations on the go, but you know, we've really pushed the boundaries of creativity in the space, right down to, depending on the geolocation you're in, you'll actually get, you know, a Cork VO. I'm not going to try to do a Cork impression, but you get the same for, no, I won't do it now.
Please.
The same for Dublin and the likes of Kerry, so it's a really great space to be in.
Yeah, and as a tech fan, one of the things that excites me is seeing innovative solutions being used. So like I know there was the shake the device to donate or to enter and so on. We're in such an exciting time where there is this emerging technology. It's not like 10 years ago where it was a transitional period. We're now in that age of innovation. Do you think we need more high-profile examples being shown to brands to see how it can be used to benefit their brand, but also the consumer, so that they have, you know, a physical interaction that connects them to that message?
Definitely, it's a campaign we're all very proud of, but one thing I love about digital audio is technology continues to advance. You know, each year we can offer up new solutions to clients. That was a brilliant one. We served listeners an audio ad which prompted them to interact. Once they shake their phone, they were brought through to a donation page. But I think that's where audio is going. You know, you have things like Instramatic ads as well, where someone is served an ad and you're prompted to speak back to it. And then based on the voice command you give, it'll play you another audio ad based on that command you've given. So it's a great space to be in. And with that, the industry kind of, I think, still needs to catch up a little bit with it.
Yeah.
You know, I think digital audio is still a nascent medium. You know, we're only not around as long as radio, but there's still a lot of the industry to kind of catch up with it as well.
Yeah, Sandra, one thing that I listen to an awful lot of podcasts, and you hear an awful lot of presenters doing the ad reads themselves. Is that something that's led by brands, or is it just whatever the style of the podcast is? And do you see more brands leaning towards personalities rather than the breakdown of an audience of a podcast?
Is it led? Sorry, two questions, right? So the first one is it led by brands or by the platforms?
Yeah.
Probably both. We try to explore, once you identify a podcast that could be a good association for the brand, then it's about all engaging with our media partners and see what is possible. But it's a long process, and we were talking about it earlier on this week, and we're probably not spending enough time with the creative commitment. So we're still doing a lot of the last minute briefs, a lot of the last minute requests, and brands want the authenticity.
Yeah.
And understandably as well, the owners of the podcast also want to be true to their language, their conversation, the narrative. So it's trying to find a good balance for the two. Sorry, what was your second question?
The question was, I suppose, are brands more drawn to a personality that presents a podcast, or does the audience of the podcast still matter more?
Good question.
To my
I
mind,
think it's the audience. Yeah, I think it's definitely the audience. But definitely the values of the presenter as well. That is very important for the tone of the brand.
And you want to jump in there? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's certainly when you're selecting a podcast, you're buying into that podcaster. So they're almost a brand ambassador for your piece of communication. So it's not necessarily, just picking any podcast because of the profile of the listener. It's more the actual personality and how they can portray the message. And often brands make the mistake that they want the podcaster to reverberate their brand message. But that is not the purpose of it. It's to put the brand personality into that host read.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's for that personality to come across in that environment. That's the integrity of it.
Yeah, one of the best examples that springs to my mind is Conan O'Brien. One of my favourite podcasts every Monday is Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And when he doesn't know a product, he takes the mick and he pretends that he does and he makes up what it is. But you can just feel his enthusiasm, and he completely sells it so well. But somebody mentioned the word authenticity and trust. And I feel at a time where consumers are being bombarded, whether it's on social media or whatever platform it is, with sponsored content and with sometimes inauthentic messaging saying, I only use this brand of phone, and then sent by iPhone and it's not an iPhone. That kind of lack of transparency, I think, gets on the wick of the consumer. So how important is it that this isn't just a one and done campaign? Is it important to have long-term relationships with presenters, with outlets, with publishers and so on?
Definitely, I think marrying it up correctly as well. So if we take Coastguard Ads exactly for an example, first of all, we take that brand to the podcaster. So it's not immediately give me the money, let's run this campaign. It's is it going to be a good match? Probably an example at the minute is the HSE are running mental health ads with us. It's running on a podcast of ours called Talking Bollocks. The two hosts, it just couldn't be any better aligned. The two hosts, they don't drink. They've talked very openly on the podcast about their struggles with it. So when it comes to marrying it up, you've got authentic voices that can relate to it. Their audience have listened to them, speak about it over multiple episodes. So, it's not forced down the neck, it's just very natural, and you just get a better service for both on the other side of it.
And, sorry, does someone
I think it's an interesting observation, to be honest, and I think it's because podcast hosts are now maturing.
Yeah.
So, at one point you wouldn't hear that many. They may have one podcast a month, but now it can get annoying for listeners if it's a different read every month or every week, and it should really be more authentic. There's a fine balance, though, between having a very long-term, a 6-month read, because it can come out like wallpaper after some time, so it's getting the balance right.
Jess, can I add to your question about authenticity, and to build on that is, one stat that I think is very good for a lot of people in this room is if you see the top podcasts across the different platforms in Ireland, 80% of that is Irish content. And I think it could be the authenticity.
Yeah, I think people like that familiarity, and I also think it is frustrating if you listen to a lot of US podcasts, as I do, for services that aren't available here in Ireland, and Conan's podcast is an example of that. I suppose the side that I'm really interested in, because I know nothing about it, is at a time when there are so many podcasts and there are so many options and opportunities for brands to advertise, how, and I suppose this is where you all come in and do a really good job, but how do brands ensure that they are finding the best place to land their message? And how do they ensure that it doesn't just get lost in the noise? Does that come back to the sonic profiling, or is it people like yourselves absolutely nailing the job?
Well, I think the great thing about digital audio is how uncluttered it is. So you are able to stand out, and people are so engaged in how they're listening to it as well. So if you think 85% of people are listening to digital audio with their headphones on, so you already have this kind of intimate relationship with the listener. People do jump around to different podcasts, absolutely, but I feel like, you know, they do have like this set of maybe 3 or 4 that they religiously listen to, and they're the ones that they really trust the most. So I do think it does come across as authentic. You do get to stand out, you know, especially in comparison to other media where you might be bombarded with a lot of messages. That opportunity to be heard on digital audio is a lot higher.
Yeah. And for traditional media outlets that now offer podcasts, are you seeing many campaigns that are that 360 approach where they will be on air, on social, on their website and in their podcasts? Or is it starting to segment a little bit where people do like a pick and mix type thing of whatever their message they're trying to land, they pick maybe 2 or 3 of those elements rather than all 4?
Yeah, it would depend on the campaign. Like for hosted ads, you know, it offers that 60-second time to get messaging across. If not, it would be geared back towards a standard spot. But it's great. Like I've seen digital audio go from being a line item on the bottom of a plan to being very high up. And, you know, we've a lot of brands that are invested in running spot ads. They'll run the dynamic audio campaign as well as host-read ads. So it's coming around to it an awful lot more now.
And I want to pick up on the point from the last session about the AI and the synthetic voices. Please don't tell me this is going to be a thing. Like, it just freaks me out and puts me out of a job. But is this something that you've encountered? And we'll run down the panel on this one because we're almost up against it. But do you see AI being utilised for advertising with voice clones or completely synthetic voices? We'll start with you and work our way down.
Well, I'm just delighted to hear that foreign accents are preferred over synthetic voices. But it's already happening. And I thought it was a very interesting insight to share from Steve, something that we definitely need to think more about, because at least from the campaigns that I've seen that it has been used, it has been effective.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, look, I have received a few ads that have AI, and you can tell it straight away. It was good to hear that Gen Z have that bullshit. You know, they know when it's going to be AI. And you can see the performance of campaigns. Like sometimes they just don't perform well. You know, I think a lot of people do prefer, especially an Irish accent on an ad for Ireland, for an Irish product. So I think that that's always going to be a place. And if you think of, you know, host reads, I don't think they're ever going to be replaced by AI, because people are listening for a podcast for that reason. They love the host. They want to know what they have to say, and they want to get their recommendations on products. I don't think having an AI host read would work that well.
Okay, I feel a bit better. Make me feel better again. Go on. What do you think?
I think Irish listeners are really astute. I wouldn't like to hear an AI trying to portray a Kerry accent. I think it wouldn't make for particularly good listening. So, yeah, hopefully not.
Okay, Graham.
I think we're very far off it. I think from probably what Andrew showed us earlier with System 1, and I think if you just take an AI ad and run it through that, I think we can probably all guess what the results would be on it. So I think it's there to enhance our jobs, you know, to enhance it, but it definitely won't be replacing it anytime soon.
We can all go off now and enjoy the rest of our day. A huge thank you to Sandra, Graham, Carol and Finola. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Many thanks, Jess, and many thanks, panel. And I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank all the panelists and all the presenters who were fantastic today. Particularly want to thank David Nelligan and our host for all morning, Sarah McInerney. So thank you to everybody for being here.